Assalamu alaikum and peace. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. We are always there 24/7, broadcasting throughout North America on Galaxy 19 satellite, covering USA coast to coast, east to west, north to south, and Canada and Mexico. And we also stream on OTT devices like Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku. You can download our app on your Android and iPhone, just Muslim Network TV, and you'll be able to download and watch us there. Our website is Muslim Network TV. Remember Oklahoma bombing? That was a while ago, right? Just a couple of days after that, I was scheduled to travel to Seattle, Washington, and being a leader of the Muslim community, we decided, okay, since I'm going there, I should have a press conference condemning terrorism. As soon as I arrive at the airport in Seattle, I have a dozen or so people asking my name, and some were uniformed, some were without uniform, sniffing dogs. And they essentially escorted me to the place where I was doing the press conference. The room was full, about 40, 50 people. I never had that many people in my press conference. But as soon as I started reading my statement, it was on behalf of All Muslims organization in America about condemning terrorism. I see those guys started looking towards each other and started leaving room. So I only have 10 or so reporters and TV cameras left. It seemed rest of them were law enforcement. I wonder what they were thinking. And when I was done and went to the parking lot at the airport still, my friend parking lot, and I saw a military type vehicle following me. And within a week, my friend who has a government job lost his job in such a hurried way that he was asked to give charge to an intern who was working with him. I don't know what was going on, but Muslims were accused of that bombing in Oklahoma. Pretty soon, of course, it became clear and news came out. It was some right-wing extremist who has been arrested. And so Islamophobes were implicating Muslim community. So these were the same right-wing extremists, probably more organized, better equipped, which our commander-in-chief, President Trump, was giving command, stand back and stand by. Whole world wonder why it is difficult to condemn them. And that was something which somebody was noted. Even at the time of President Obama, when Department of Homeland Security, DHS issued a report about the dangers of right-wing extremism. It was condemned so much, I don't know who else, but definitely Republicans and conservative, that the Department of Homeland Security chief have to actually apologize. And they disbanded that group which was working on. They assigned them to work on the Islamic extremism, the old bogey. And the person who was leading the group actually was forced to leave. That was Daryl Johnson, and he's our guest today to talk about right-wing extremism. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Daryl. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Malik.
Okay. Daryl Johnson is author of a book called Homeland, a long, hard look at America's extremist heart. He worked as a senior analyst at the Department of Homeland Security, leading a team on keeping an eye on these people, and which issued the report. And now he's a founder of DT Analytics. Now, Southern Poverty Law Center says that there is a 55% increase in white nationalist hate groups Tell me, is the same as the anti-government extremist, or there is a difference between these two?
So when we look at domestic terrorism, we categorize the extremist movements on the political spectrum as either being far right or far left. So when you're dealing with the far right, you're talking about two large groups or movements. One is the white supremacist movement, and the other is the anti-government movement. So they are similar in the fact that they're right-wing leaning, nationalistic. They may have racism within these groups, but they have two different causes that they're defending. One is white supremacy oriented. The other is repelling the tyrannical government. And so within these two big movements, we also have sub-movements. So under white supremacy, you have neo-Nazis, you have racist skinhead gangs, you have KKK factions, you have Aryan prison gangs. You also have a racist religious philosophy called Christian identity, which believes that whites are the true Israelites, not those in the Middle East. And as far as anti-government groups, we have sovereign citizens that don't believe in being a U.S. citizen, so they don't follow our laws. They don't adhere to government regulation. They don't pay their taxes. And then we have these paramilitary groups called militias that are also under the anti-government umbrella. So as you can see, it's a very diverse group of extremists that fall under this far right extremism.
What is the size of these groups altogether? How many are these?
Well, it's difficult to estimate the membership. We tried to do this at Homeland Security, and mind you, you're talking about a wide range of supporters. Some people advocate violence. Some people carry out violence. Other people donate money or add, rhetorical support or make calls for violence. So there's a wide swath of people. But when you're talking white supremacy, you're numbering in the hundreds of thousands of Americans adhering and supporting to white supremacy. On the anti-government side, it's a little less. We're talking tens of thousands of paramilitary members and probably hundreds of thousands of sovereign citizens.
Is there any overlap that some of them are part of both, or their ideology is very clear to them?
So in any type of extremism, you do have people that, the different philosophies blend together. They may be members of both white supremacists and the anti-government groups. And then you have other people that are just strict adherents to those different philosophies. So it's kind of a mix.
Would you say they are on the rise? Are there any latest reports or something about that?
Yeah, so we saw the first growth of these movements in the aftermath of Ruby Ridge and Waco. These were two government standoffs with extremists in the early 90s. That's when we started seeing a rise, the new rise of, white supremacy and anti-government groups. And so after Oklahoma City, because law enforcement started investigating the violent offenders, the courts started sentencing leaders who were, conspiring with people for violence. We had states that passed paramilitary laws, banning paramilitary training. We had people that just got bored with this revolution that they kept preparing for that never materialized. So we had, by the late 90s, these groups were on the decline, and into the early 2000s, they were still around, but they just weren't proliferating and growing like they have been the past 10 years. It was within the 2008 when we had the unprecedented election of the first African-American president that, coupled with the housing bubble economic collapse, that provided a fertile ground for recruiting. And so we have this new second wave of militia and white supremacy and anti-government extremism that started in 2007 and has continued to grow all the way to 2020.
What are the other demographic? Are they some middle-aged people, older, or they have equal participation from all sides?
Yeah, so these movements are representative of society. So you have people of all ages that have committed acts of terrorism and violence. We've had people as young as 17 years old, like Kyle Rittenhouse, who conducted the shooting up in Kenosha recently. And we've had people up in their late 70s, 60s, late 60s years old, like James Von Brunn, who carried out the Holocaust Memorial shooting back in 2009 in Washington, D.C. So there's a wide range of people, and they come from different backgrounds. A lot of them, have military experience. Some of them are just tradesmen. Others have been educated in our colleges and universities. But it's predominantly white male. We do have females that belong to these organizations. We've also had people of color, but that tends to be a very small minority.
And they subscribe to the same ideology, or what are their reasons of the people of color being in there?
Well, they particularly gravitate towards the anti-government side of the movement. They're fearful of, an economic collapse. Maybe they've lost their job. Maybe they're fearful of government corruption or their constitutional rights being infringed upon. So that's why there's a wider appeal for, both predominantly white, but also some minority groups joining up with militias and sovereign citizens.
Now, are they concentrated in certain part of the country, or they are spread out?
So every state in the country has these types of people living in their populations, but we do have concentrations throughout the country for both white supremacy as well as the anti-government groups. So as far as white supremacy, the Southeast United States, because of the history of the Civil War and everything else, continues to be a hub for white supremacy. Also, when the Pacific Northwest, a lot of people want to flee the city centers and they go out west and they want to form their own separate United States or another country in the Pacific Northwest. And of course, your populated states like Texas and California have larger numbers just because the populations are larger. As far as the anti-government groups, they're concentrated along the Appalachian Mountain chain. We also have a concentration in what we call the Midwest around the Great Lakes region, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and also the Pacific Northwest. And again, those states like Texas and California because of the population densities. Some of the southern states, Southwest, like Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and California, also have a little bit larger militia presence because of the Southwest border and some of the issues that they look at regarding immigration.
Are they mostly middle-class people or poorer people?
It's kind of hard to say. I would say that it's a mix. I've mentioned before kind of the different types of occupations these people have engaged in. There needs to be more work that looks into the violent offenders and what their backgrounds are. But like I said, military backgrounds is very common. People with trade skills, whether it's carpentry, construction, things of that nature. But we have had people that have been government employees, have worked in private industries that have also adhered to these belief systems. And, these extremist belief systems, they're out there and people come across them and it affects all classes of people.
You mentioned military, former military. Is it a disproportionate participation or somewhat?
So on the white supremacy side, it's a lot smaller participation, or people have had those backgrounds, but still it equals hundreds, if not thousands, of former military members have had contact or belong to these extremist groups. It's more on the militia, paramilitary side that we see the higher concentrations, and I would say that upwards of 20 to 25% of militia groups are comprised of people with current or former military backgrounds.
there is a high level of former military who commit suicide also. So does it have something to do with whatever trauma they have gone through? People who are in somewhat depressed, some hurt themselves and others hurt other people. So is there some of that psychological phenomena in place here?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not a predominant role, but certainly people's war experience, they come back home, traumatic experiences from being on the battlefield. So some of the violent offenders have suffered from PTSD because they're not getting the adequate treatment here, or not being able to get a job easily or reacclimate into society. And so they fall victim to recruitment by these groups, not only for their military background and experience, but also their leadership skills that they've shown and the paramilitary skills they've learned on the battlefield. So it's kind of a mix of different factors that, draw the extremists to target these military veterans.
You're watching Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Daryl Johnson, who's an expert on right-wing militias, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Adam. You remember me? I appeared in so many episodes that Sound Vision has put on the market. No matter what. Hey, what's happening? Hey, oh, sorry. Lockdown is what it is. Well, continuing here. In this lockdown, Sound Vision never stops thinking about you, the viewer. We'll have to get back into production again, online and inline. Everybody in their own space, even me. Although I'm stuck with Lanisa.
Salam! Salam! Salam!
I know, you were shocked too. Well, let me continue. This is what I was going to say. Salam! 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 Cut! 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 Finally, I get my own screen time again. Thank God. And so we invested in new equipment to bring you even better production with new songs and new singers and animations. Well, here are a few clips. And Sound Vision has brought all this into your home, making Islamic values and teachings easy. And if you know me, Adam, a multi-talented actor, well, sometimes I'm an actor and the reporter and the... Oh, that's enough. Let's move on to the next section. Well, you can watch these new episodes on our new app at www.adamsworldapp.com. We have previews happening every day on Muslim Network TV. Sound Vision has been serving generations, moving and changing with the times. We are all faithfully connected. That is a huge blessing. Your donation helps keep these programs available now and into the future. We take this job of helping tomorrow's Muslims today seriously, and you should too. Today, we need your help. Children absorb and learn from everything they encounter. Make that wholesome, positive, grounded in our faith. Together, we can accomplish our goal of raising better Muslims, better neighbors, and better citizens. Please donate generously. It's an investment in our future. But to finish, let me tell you, there are new scripts of my new mission. And it is something that I enjoy talking about. My new mission is space. Houston, we do not have a problem. Salam, see you soon.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Daryl Johnson, who's an expert in right-wing extremism. So from what year to what year were you with the Department of Homeland Security?
Yeah, so I was with the Department of Homeland Security from 2004 until 2010, but I've had a background in studying these extremist groups for other agencies, as well as my collegiate studies. So my interest in this topic actually goes back to when I was 15 years old. I actually saw I saw a new program about a standoff back in 1985 on a lake in Arkansas involving white supremacists being surrounded by the FBI and ATF because they had some fugitive terrorists there. And they uncovered a plot to poison water supplies and to bomb churches and things of this nature. The group was called the Covenant Sword Arm of the Lord. And when I saw that, I was just intrigued by why people of a religious background who are supposed to be kind, loving, peaceful individuals turned into a church that was plotting terrorism and hatred and violence and trying to hasten the end of the world. And that just interested me as a teenage boy. And so I took an interest in these subjects and, became educated about them and took classes in college about it and studied it and turned it into a career.
Were you any time while young were intrigued to the level that you wanted to join them?
No, I didn't want to join these groups, but I was intrigued because some of my personal beliefs at the time were similar to their beliefs. So there was kind of an interest there, but of course I didn't want to hurt anybody or, do criminal activity or terrorists. But it was just something that as, a teenage boy, I was interested in why these people believe these things. And it was just curiosity.
How many people are like you who are experts in right-wing research in right-wing extremism in our country? Is it a big field or a small field?
Yeah, it's a very small, tight-knit field of study. So at the federal level, we have, just a handful of analysts at the FBI, Homeland Security, led by myself. Other federal law enforcement agencies may have one analyst looking at these types of things. So it is a very small niche community within the federal law enforcement and intelligence community. You're talking dozens of analysts, where those looking at, Al-Qaeda and ISIS types threats are in the hundreds, if not a few thousand analysts looking at that.
Is still the same case, or it was you're telling me the old story?
It's still the same case. I keep in touch with people in my career that I've met and forged ties with. The FBI did grow its program a little bit back in 2008 when Obama was elected, but still it's in the dozens. It's not like they hired hundreds of people.
Now, when you developed this report, did you start that section within Homeland Security to study, or the section existed before you joined?
So I was actually recruited to join Homeland Security and bring my expertise. And I was the very first analyst at the Department of Homeland Security that looked at non-Islamic terrorism. And because there was so much work to do, I went to my supervisor and said, we have to have more analysts because it's too much work for one person. So over the course of time, we hired additional analysts to start helping monitor these threats. So we were looking at, both the far right, the types of groups that I've described to you, but also the far left, which is not as active and does not have as much extremist members. But there are far left extremists like the, violent anarchists, Antifa type individuals. We also have black supremacy. That's very similar to the white supremacy, but they believe that the black race is superior and they've carried out acts of violence. So we looked at all the different types, animal rights, environmental terrorists. So we had quite a bit of groups and movements to look at and assess the threat levels.
And so your portfolio was not just right-wing extremists, but everything but the Muslim connected terrorism, which was international in nature. And that one you're saying has several thousand people still, and this one is still have dozens of people only?
Yep.
Well, this is just very surprising. So when you developed the report, why a administration, which was Obama's administration, had to apologize on that? I mean, was there some inaccuracies found in your report?
There were no inaccuracies, but there were a couple of, I guess, topics that were controversial, one of which was the returning veterans coming home and being recruited into extremist organizations. Some of the veteran organizations didn't like the fact that I was drawing attention to that phenomenon, which has existed for decades. There was also controversy over our definition of what a right-wing extremist is. And basically, we described right-wing extremism as being comprised of hate-oriented organizations as well as anti-government, and they may focus on single issue such as gun rights, abortion, taxation, things of this nature, because we've had violent people who have focused just on those single issues. And so some of the conservative media and Republicans took things out of context, and they wanted to do anything they could to embarrass the new administration, because in 2008, they not only lost the White House, but also congressional and Senate seats. And so it was a big loss for the Republicans. And so they were looking for anything that they could do to embarrass the new administration or cause a controversy. And that's what they did. They took things out of context. They spun things politically, and they used an intelligence report to basically create a political firestorm, which is unfortunate because the message, the warning that was in that report got lost.
And that despite the fact you yourself were Republican and a person of faith, you were not joining any liberal leftist agenda there.
Right. At the time, I was probably one of the most conservative type of people you could come across in America. I was raised in a very conservative religion community called Mormonism, but I was also a third-generation Republican, gun owner. I was pretty much toting the party line and believed those things. My political and religious views have changed since then, but at the time, I was probably the most conservative poster child you could get.
So when Obama administration apologized, what did they apologize for?
Basically for offending conservatives and, I guess dishonoring military vets. They thought that we could have been more sensitive to those two topics.
So the report was withdrawn officially, or report is stayed on the record?
All right, so the report was vetted properly, followed all of the procedures and rules that we had in place. The FBI concurred on it. I briefed Janet Napolitano face-to-face. She agreed with the findings. The FBI was there at the briefing. And so it was released officially. It was only when the controversy and the political fighting began that they pulled the report back and said they were going to rewrite it, and which they never did. But they tried to say that the report was, leaked or put out without official, authorities, and that was wrong.
I noted that at that time, Representative Keith Ellison from Minnesota asked President Obama to reopen the Extremism Office at Department of Homeland Security. What was the outcome? Did they restart, or still they don't have any office there?
Yeah, so they don't have an office doing it like we were back in 2008, 2009. But they've tried to work with the FBI and put out some intelligence reports to the police about these groups, but it's nothing like what it was when I was there.
So is America, do you think America, knowing that there are only so many, few dozen analysts working on it, do you think America is better ready to deal with right-wing extremism as compared to when you were there?
No, in fact, I think they're less prepared because the movements have grown year after year for 10 years, where we haven't devoted the same amount of resources and money into developing strategies and investigating these groups. So we're very behind the threat, and it has grown to the point where people can't ignore it anymore. We have to do something.
So is the intelligence committee still somewhat afraid of focusing on the right-wing extremism because of what happened to you and your report?
Right. So because of the political backlash that my unit received for that report, it created a chilling effect in both the law enforcement and intelligence communities that if you write about these subjects, we're going to object to it and we're going to come after your organization. We're going to try to pull funding. We're going to try to get people fired. We're going to, hound you with all kinds of information requests and hassle you. And so it made it very apparent people became disinterested or outright scared to research or write about this topic for fear of retaliation.
What do you think, Daryl, that the vice president being a black Kamala Harris, married to a Jewish person, do you think it will again reignite and strengthen the right-wing extremism?
Yeah, I think we're in a heightened period of risk. with the Republican administration leaving and the Democratic administration coming in, all the trends that I've looked at for the past 40 years on these right-wing extremists, they get more active and more agitated during Democratic administrations. So unfortunately, we're in for another round of these types of groups and their violence and their harassment and criminal activity. So we are, elected officials and our law enforcement officials need to understand that we're going to continue to have this threat for, the next 4, 8, 10 years.
You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Daryl Johnson, who started a team and led the team at Department of Homeland Security before team was disbanded, and he was let go about white extremism. And we'll be right back after these messages.
My wife, she's a professor at the University of Cincinnati, who's Catholic, and by her watching and listening to our 3-year-old son watch Adam's World, she ended up taking Kalima Shahada. She embraced Islam because she learned so much about Islam and the other prophets. It really affected our life in a great way, and because of Sound Vision and Adam's World, we're Muslims.
I took my Shahada 15 years ago, and I actually am from a rural part of Ohio. And so I found the catalog for Sound Vision, and I ordered the tapes and the CDs and the books, and I used those, and especially for my little daughter, that's how we basically learned our Islam, and Islam entered our hearts through the wonderful works of Sound Vision.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, brother. I just want you to know that I love the Sound Vision website, that a lot of times when I'm looking for information, especially as it relates to homelessness, domestic violence, and women issues, I go to that website, and then I see what you've written, and then I copy and paste it, and spread the word, because the wisdom is there, so I can't do any better than what Sound Vision has already done.
Sound Vision is our survival guide. It is the organization that provides skills for Muslims how to survive and thrive in this community here in the U.S.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Anam, I'm in 11th grade, and I grew up with Adam's World, and what it taught me was unity, respect, and love for the Muslim Ummah.
Adam's World is the greatest show ever made. Take me to the Kaaba, man. I love that puppet.
Assalamu alaikum!
Open up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe, and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid talking with Daryl Johnson, former Department of Homeland Security. You know, about 10 years ago in 2010, there was a report, a cover story in Time magazine about the right-wing militias. And it has many organizations, but it has started talking about a particular militia's Ohio Defense Force. So while preparing for this show, I went looking for them, not in person, not with my guns or anything, just on internet. And it turned out they have a website, and it is an incorporated entity, as a not-for-profit entity, and doing well, it seems. So are most of these groups are not-for-profit organizations?
Well, not all of them, but some of them do go through the formal process of establishing an organization identity, website, and even register with their local governments as a business or a nonprofit. Something that's very interesting is, there's been this debate for decades on whether these private militias are lawful. They hide behind the Second Amendment of the Constitution that says, that we have the right to bear arms and assemble and form these militias, and that the rights of the militia won't be infringed and things like this. Georgetown Law this year, and as well as last year, did some research and found out that every state in the country has a law that says that these militia organizations are illegitimate, that they're not supposed to exist, and that it's against the law to exist. Only when the governor or some other government official calls upon the militia is it legitimized. So all these organizations that haven't had a governor or senators or their own county council call them up are all unlawful. And unfortunately, law enforcement really hasn't applied this law and enforced it.
So it's in some way tolerated. I mean, this is what Ohio Defense Force says. I'm quoting from their website. We do volunteer our service to our local government. This has included the county commissioners, sheriffs, and police departments. So it seems not only they're being tolerated, but there is a collaborative effort. And when the Kenosha, Wisconsin incident happened, the gunman who murdered a couple of people and injured another one was walking, raising his hand, and nobody bothered to arrest him. Actually, some law enforcement provided them, some water or something before the incident. So what is this collaboration between law enforcement and the militias?
Yeah, it's a particularly disturbing aspect of these extremist groups, and the FBI has been aware of, and the Justice Department, that these ties exist. And so that's why the FBI and federal authorities, when they do investigations into the unlawful activities of these groups, like firearms violations, bomb plots, things like this, they only have a few trusted state and local law enforcement people that they vet who participate in these investigations. A lot of times they keep the investigations hidden from the local and state authorities for fear of the investigation being compromised or the suspects of the investigation being tipped off. So this is one of the things I recently took on the responsibility of being a non-resident fellow for the Center for Global Policy, which is a think tank, a nonpartisan think tank. And I've written a couple of assessments for them, which you can read on their website. And that's one of the things we've been calling for as a policy, is for, local state officials to distance themselves from these extremist groups. And if there are any law enforcement officers that are members of them, that there needs to be some sort of administrative action taken to remove them from sensitive positions, interacting with the community. It really calls into question their ability to, be objective in their police work. because they subscribe to different types of conspiracy theories, extremist beliefs. They believe things that are unfactually not true. So that's a big concern, and it's something that we've been calling for better policing of the police departments and purging these extremist sympathizers from within the ranks of police departments.
Well, good luck with that. 24 or so analysts around the country, they're not enough to recommend research, not enough to analyze, not enough to recommend. And if they're recommended, I don't know what level it is getting stuck at. But with the same report about the Ohio Defense Force, the Time magazine, start off seeing their exercise. And that exercise was to destroy a headquarter of Islamic terrorist force, because they saying that Islamic terrorists are growing in Michigan and Illinois and Ohio and all that. So where did this thing that their focus on Muslims and these things is coming from? Are they listening to the post 9/11 government rhetoric and thriving based on that and developing a sort of a common cause between law enforcement and themselves? So what is the genesis of this thing?
Yeah, so a lot of these militia groups today try to distance themselves from white supremacy and racism and hate. But in reality, you just pointed out, these militia groups are indeed hate groups because they have very extreme views on immigration, and particularly Latin Americans who come here to the country. And they also, embrace Islamophobia. So this has come from not only the high concentration of military veterans and, current and former military members who fought over in Afghanistan and Iraq and have been indoctrinated to dehumanize, their opponents on the battlefield who are, Muslims. There's also the 9/11, these groups use the flag and patriotism. They're ultra nationalistic. So they want to protect this country from any foreign invaders or perceived threats from, whether it's the Middle East or Latin America. But also there's conspiracy theories out there that talk about, how Muslims, as they come into America, they're going to implement Sharia law and things of this nature, and outlaw Christianity and things like this, which are totally unfactual and not true. But these people fear that, and they, believe in that. And so that's what I think is at kind of the center of them targeting the American Muslim community. And we've seen, militia members up in Minnesota that actually threw a pipe bomb into a mosque in Bloomington. Fortunately, it was nobody was at the Islamic Center at the time, so nobody got hurt or killed, but it did damage the facility and showed that these people were willing to hurt and kill Muslims. We also had a group in Kansas that plotted to drive a vehicle bomb to an apartment complex of Somali Muslim immigrants and blow up their homes. So these are just a couple of examples of the threat that these militia groups have posed to the Muslim community here in the United States.
Yeah, there are close to 500 mosques which has been targeted at different levels as ACLU keeps the tab on that. Here's what, if they're thriving on the government rhetoric of Muslim ban and before that, and invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan and those things together, and considering Muslim Americans to be, part and parcel of what is going on in the overseas. But that rhetoric, those attacks are not just in isolation. In 34 states, 100 plus laws have been presented to ban that so-called Sharia. And in 14 states, those laws passed, although had no practical implications. So what do they think? Do they think Muslims are not 1% of the society, but a larger number, or they have tanks or something, or they're going to vote the Sharia in? How Sharia going to come in according to their perceptions?
I think according to their perceptions, they look at Muslims as foreigners and people that, believe in a false religion according to them, because they're, devoutly Christian, most of the militias. So they look at the, Islamic religion as a threat. They look at just Muslims, with their, customs, their practices and culture, the way they dress. All of that to them is foreign, and they're fearful of these foreign influences eroding what they think America should look like, which is predominantly white and Christian. So those are two big aspects that I think, draw the attention of these groups and want to target. So when they see the population, the number of mosques growing or the number of Muslim Americans growing, they're fearful that at some point, they'll become the majority.
Wow. They need to somehow understand the power of America, that everybody who comes into this melting pot itself is start diluting instead of increasing to anything. One of the things, now during the Trump administration and President Trump, who says, stand back and stand by and that type of thing. So there is a sort of overlap between the political rhetoric, and then it gets into the darker areas of becoming extremism, of lightweight extremism, or then deep militia, and then within militia, those who are willing to actually act on it. So it seems there is a rhetoric and action at one or the other level are connected. So it tells me that the capacity of Democratic administration might be somewhat limited to influence or convince them to stay back instead of stand by. So do you think that Republicans and people who consider themselves on the right side of the center and conservative have some responsibility to deal with this particular phenomenon?
Yes, they have a greater responsibility, because it takes people like myself, who was raised conservative, registered Republican, to call out this threat. Because if the Democrats are the only ones that are condemning it, it just feeds into, the fact that they feel that the Democrats are persecuting them, that the Democrats are expanding the rights of minorities, that they're going to go after their guns. So it's going to take Republican leadership to lead this fight against right-wing extremism. Of course, both parties need to call out and condemn the violence and criminality and the nonsense, the conspiracy theories and stuff like this, and treat all extremism as, threats, depending on how active they are involved and how many attacks they're involved in. And so, elected officials, when you're running for office, you need to take greater care with your rhetoric and your messaging, because someone on the fringe is out there listening to you and could actually take what you're saying and act on it violently to hurt other people. So we've seen this correlation between public officials' messaging and increases in violent hate crimes, as well as terrorist plotting. Many of your listeners probably remember Cesar Sayoc, the bomber who mailed the mail bomb packages back in 2016 to different Democrats and Democratic supporters. So that's just one example of how a politician's message could fall onto the ears of an extremist and cause them to mobilize towards violence.
So what do you think are the chances of some people on the Republican side who will take up this cause of saving our country from another form of extremism and terrorism?
Yeah, unfortunately, they've been predominantly silent on this issue for the past 10 years. I'm hoping that as we move into a new phase, trying to heal America, to try to address the racial division, the social injustices, the grievances that have been brought out and all the civil unrest over the summer, that more and more Republicans will, come forward and take a leadership role in these efforts. Because like I said, I mean, the Democrats can try as much as they want, but, the more they try, the more it feeds into the extremist worldview on the far right, and it makes them more fearful and even more agitated. So it's going to take, Republicans leading the effort with Democrats supporting them to address this issue from, federal level.
Is there any group in existence of those people who, in their earlier life, were part of the right-wing extremism, and now they are reform and they're working together to communicate, because they are the people who know the language, they know the ideology, they may have some cultural affinity with these people. Is there any effort like that?
Yeah, we've seen some groups form to what we call counter radicalization, or to counter message these groups, or to pull people out of these movements and reform them and acclimate them back into society. A good friend of mine, Christian Picciolini, was one of the first organizations that tried to seek federal grant funding for this. He was given hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Obama administration to set up a organization to do exactly this. And the Trump administration canceled it within the first few months of coming into office in 2016. So that's one effort that I believe in, and I think that the Democratic administration should take a look at and fund these types of organizations to pull people out of the white supremacy and militia groups and try to reacclimate them into society.
What else the president-elect should consider doing to deal with this? Because this is a serious danger, isn't it?
It sure is. I mean, we definitely need money and resources. I think we've had enough FBI testimony, Homeland Security testimony recently to point out that this is the primary national security threat within the country. So definitely let the threat dictate the money and resources to combat it. Don't just sit there and blindly keep funding, all these analysts to look at, Muslim threats at the expense of other threats that we have here in the country that are more dangerous and more active. One thing that I'm also involved in is this nonprofit organization in Wisconsin called We Are Many United Against Hate. And they've just recently, just within the past month, started a program called Erase Hate in our public schools. And so we have 2 high schools in Wisconsin that have signed up to participate in this program. And I hope that it becomes a national program, because we need to start educating, our children, not only about the dangers of drugs and gangs, but the dangers of extremism. And so if anyone's interested in, starting this program, Erase Hate in their schools, they should reach out to the organization's head, Masood Akhtar, and see what they need to do to start this program.
Okay. If you provide their website, we will provide to, through our people who are watching, and provide that particular link. Well, so give me your bottom line. Do you feel that these right-wing extremism is going to rise further?
So the bottom line is these right-wing extremists have organized and carried out acts of violence and are operating at a heightened level for the past 10 years. They're going to continue to operate at a heightened level and conduct attacks and continue recruiting for the next 4, 5, maybe even up to 10 years. So it's going to take a lot of effort on the part of both the governments at all levels, state, local, and federal, as well as people, you and I, increasing our understanding about the dangers of these organizations and the types of beliefs that they're, propagating. If we have family members, neighbors, or friends who belong to these types of extremist groups or adhere to their beliefs, rather than distancing ourselves from them, we need to become more inclusive, trying to show them love and get them involved in our communities, and to break down the stereotypes that fuel these extremist beliefs, stereotypes about different races, different faith-based communities. So together, we can all chip in to try to push against this extremist threat. And I'm grateful now that we've got enough academics and non-government organizations that realize this is a threat, and so they're trying to research and produce reports and provide policy recommendations, such as I have with the Center of Global Policy, to our elected officials so that we can get a handle on this threat and finally, decrease it.
Well, thank you so much, Daryl Johnson. Daryl Johnson is an expert on right-wing extremism, worked for the Homeland Security in the past, and suffered because of his work. Well, thank you so much for your work. Truly appreciate it. And thank you for being with us. And thank you, our producers, Shahdil Khan and Abdul Wahid, to produce today's show. And thank you so much for you watching Muslim Network TV. We are always there on Galaxy 19 satellite, covering whole North America, as well as streaming on Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and you're on iPhone and Android phones. Just download our app, Muslim Network TV, or our own website, muslimnetwork.tv. Thank you so much, and keep watching. Peace. Salam.